here for the first time, please consider subscribing to this channel. Also, hit the notification bell so that whenever I upload a new video, you are notified. In this video, we'll be talking about Kenya's shift in SGR financing from an earlier agreed upon multi-way model now to full Chinese funding. Kenya has significantly altered its financing approach for the extension of the standard gauge railway from Suswa to Malaba. This line, as we know, is a strategic link in the East African trade corridor. Latest reports indicate that the Kenyan government has abandoned the multi-funding model initially agreed upon with Chinese investors. In the dramatic policy shift, Kenya is now seeking full financing from China, foregoing its earlier commitment to raise 30%, which is equivalent to 174 billion Kenya shillings of the 581.6 billion project cost, which is equivalent to 5.3 US dollars in terms of billions. The initial plan unveiled as part of the broader strategy to enhance regional trade and connectivity. This was hailed for its innovation. The government had adopted a three-pronged funding model to spread financial risk and reduce pressure on public finances. In this model, 30% was to be contributed by the Kenyan government, 40% was to come from the Chinese consortium, and 30% was to be financed through loans from China Exim Bank. This model that was abandoned had three-pronged approach, as we have said. One is the Kenyan government contribution. Kenya portion was valued at $1.9 billion. This was to be sourced through the Railways Development Levy and potential securitization, which is raising capital through bonds backed by future revenues. However, the country's ballooning public debt, now exceeding over 70 billion US dollars, casts serious doubts on the sustainability of this strategy. Though innovative, the model posed significant risk, especially amid revenue shortfalls and growing expenditure pressures. Two, then we had the Chinese consortium investment, which was 40%. A group of Chinese firms had agreed to finance and operate the railway for 25 years, collecting toll revenue to recoup their investment, and the ownership of the railway was to remain in Kenya, with operation rights ceded to the consortium during the concession period. This element of the model offered a relatively balanced public-private partnership with long-term benefits for both sides. Then you have the third side, which was a loan which was to come from Chinese Exim Bank, and this was to take 30%. The final portion was to be provided by through a concession loans from China Exim Bank, featuring a grace period with repayment starting after 2029. This structure offered Kenya's critical breathing space to allow revenue generation from the railway before debt servicing obligation began. At the time, Kenya government officials had championed this blended finance model as both strategic and sustainable, offering shared responsibility and access to international expertise. A senior official from the Ministry of Transport noted that this approach marked a departure from reliance on a single source, emphasizing risk mitigation and broader investment engagement. So what are the physical realities that force the government to make this U-turn? Kenya's recent reversal is largely attributed to intensifying physical pressure. The National Treasury confirmed that the government is no longer in a position to contribute its 30% share due to escalating public expenditure and also underperforming revenues. Treasury Cabinet Secretary acknowledged that Kenya is now seeking a funding model that excludes government contribution entirely. The latest shift reportedly follows a high-level meeting between President William Ruto and Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing. While official communique focused on cooperation in railway regulations and technical standards, sources confirm that revising the funding structure was central to the talks. The government is under mounting physical strain, worsened by a series of recent events. One is the withdrawal of the finance bill in mid-2024, following nationwide protest, which limited the government's ability to implement new revenue-raising measures. There's also the raising recurrent expenditure, which is linked to new collective bargaining agreements, curriculum reforms, as well as universal healthcare rollout. And this has further narrowed fiscal space. Despite allocating 16.5 billion in the 2025-2026 budget for the SDR, the Treasury now concedes that progress will stall without new external funding. What are the ongoing discussions and what are the future options? While negotiations are ongoing, the Treasury has not ruled out other financing models. These include public-private partnership (PPPs), concessional loans, or even blend of mechanisms that would minimize sovereign debt exposure. The Ministry or the National Treasury is evaluating all the options. Kenya had earlier considered domestic financing to avoid further Chinese debt. This would have involved amending the railway development levy and revising land ownership laws alongside the creation of a special purpose vehicle (SPV) to hold railway assets until debt obligations were repaid. However, this path now appears untenable given the current physical constraints. China, meanwhile, is reported demanding stronger guarantees from Nairobi that the SDR extension will generate sufficient revenue to justify any additional lending. This highlights a growing concern among the international lenders about project bankability and return on investment. This rising debt and China factor. Kenya outstanding debt to China as of December 2024 stood at 682 billion Kenya shillings, mostly tied to earlier phases of SDR, particularly from Mombasa to Nairobi, and then there was a decision to halt the railway extension from Suswa, and this was widely criticized, with opponents branding it as the railway to nowhere. Yet, the government continues to stress the strategic necessity of completing the project to Malaba. Officials argue that completing the line to Malaba would unlock trade potential across the region, linking Kenya with Uganda, Rwanda, and the DRC, and even beyond. Uganda has formally urged Kenya to accelerate the project so it can begin SDR construction on its side. Rwanda has expressed interest in the line's completion. The next phase, Naivasha or Suswa to Kisumu, is projected to cost 380 billion Kenya shillings, while the final leg to Malaba will require an estimated of 122.9 billion Kenya shillings. Despite active talks, no definitive timeline has been set, and uncertainty over funding continues to threaten delays on a critical corridor, which is designed to ease the movement of goods from Mombasa port to the inland regions. What are the risks, benefits, and the path forward? Benefits, as we know, if this line is completed, it could significantly reduce transport costs, increase trade efficiency, as well as enhance regional integration. It will also help in decongesting roads networks, reduce transit times, and make Kenya a vital logistics hub in East Africa. However, there are risks. A fully debt finance model, particularly through a single lender like China, could increase dependency and further elevate Kenya's debt distress risk. There is also the risk of revenue projections remaining uncertain, especially if the uptake from neighboring countries does not meet the expectation. The political risk of the public backlash, as seen during the finance bill protests, could also derail or delay the project further. What are the recommendations and way forward? Kenya should negotiate a phased financing tied to specific project milestones to avoid overexposure. Transparent cost-benefit analysis should also be presented to the public to build trust and support. If insisting on external financing, Kenya must ensure clear revenue sharing models and dispute resolution mechanisms are embedded in the final agreement. In conclusion, we can say that Kenya's shift from multi-source funding model to request for a full Chinese financing reflects countries' deepening physical challenges and urgency to keep strategic infrastructure projects alive. While the multi-way model offered a more sustainable path, current economic realities have forced a reconsideration. As talk with China continues, the government must strike a careful balance between infrastructure ambition on one side and fiscal prudence on the other side, lest the railway meant to unlock the region becomes a long-term financial burden. So thank you for reaching this far. If it's your first time here, please consider subscribing to this channel. Also, hit the notification bell so that whenever I upload a new video, you are notified. We'd also like to hear your thoughts about this, as well as other projects that you have done. Thank you.